So welcome everyone. Great to have you all here. So what I'm going to talk about today is CRM 3.0. Just to kind of like level set what we're talking about there. So CRM 1.0 is your batch and blast campaign. So you create a list and you send it to everyone. It's reactive, it's channel centric, it is a list of individuals that you target and you send one message to. Sometimes you might have personalized variants within it, but it's a one-off campaign. And most people who work in CRM marketing are still doing some of that today, and you're probably always going to need to do some of that in some contexts. CRM 2.0 is lifecycle journeys. So you build a flow, you build an onboarding journey, you build an in-life journey, you build a cancellation flow, and it's proactive, it's trigger-based, it's structured, but it's still based on rules. You might have more personalization, but it's still based on rules. What we're talking about today is one-to-one journeys at scale. So real-time, not segments, not cohorts, truly one-to-one messages for every individual customer. And I'll go into the detail of what that means in reality, leveraging agents. Now, just to introduce myself, I've spent 26 years in retention and CRM. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been advising CEOs and exco teams on retention and CRM strategy. And that covers the entire retention hierarchy of needs, from product proposition, acquisition quality, through to moments of truth. I'm currently working with a CEO in Florida in a subscription business. I'm working with a CEO of a subscription app, and I'm working with a CMO and a CCO at a major streaming brand. I have a newsletter, free newsletter. Everyone's welcome to subscribe. Probably some of you already subscribed. That has about 100 case studies and frameworks. I've done CRM marketing courses, and over version 1 and version 2, over 2,000 people have taken those video on demand courses. And the last 6 months or so, I've transformed my retention consultancy into a retention agency through the delivery of several successful projects. And what that means is pairing my retention strategy consultancy experience with AI execution. I built a retention AI second brain, which I will talk to you about in this call. And I help clients with AI executed CRM 2.0, so lifecycle strategy, and also building CRM agents. Some of the clients I work with are down the bottom there. If you want to know more about my background and experience, obviously connect on LinkedIn if you're not already connected. But I spent 8 years prior to my own consultancy. I spent 8 years client-side and senior roles. I was SVP of retention at DAZN, and prior to that, I spent 13 publicist agencies as global CRM director. So this is like really what I've been doing for the majority of my career, and I've worked with like many big brands in this space. So like the gap that we have, right? The data is individual. So we have behavioral signals, we have engagement patterns, we have life cycle states, we have real-time attributes, we have an understanding of the moments that matter to each individual. But marketing is still built in segments. And when you think about CRM 2.0 or even CRM 1.0 batch and blast based campaigns, they are built for the average customer, but the average customer only really reflects a fraction of the base. And I want to say though, like, CRM marketing 2.0 lifecycle programs, they do work, right? They really do work. Personalization of those programs do work, but their impact is capped because ultimately every customer is different in every single moment. So what we're going to talk to about today is how to use those individual signals to drive one-to-one CRM marketing for every customer, one at a time, every time, and be able to audit it using agents. But look, this isn't like some hunch that I have, this isn't like my personal opinion. This is what the commentators are saying, right? So you look at Forrester. Forrester have clearly gone out, and you've got the reference there to the article from this year. Brands will use agents for reasoning, not rules. But brands will use agents to reason and dynamically decide how to execute work. And Gartner have said that by the end of 2028, 60% of brands will use agentic AI to deliver one-to-one interactions. Now that directly affects what we do. And this is not a pie in the sky. Like, this is what leading brands, and I'll talk a little bit later on today about what Netflix and Uber do, but other leading brands are doing today, one-to-one CRM marketing at scale, leveraging AI and leveraging agents. So what you'll leave with today, the architecture, I will share the end-to-end build of Agentic 3.0 so that you can turn individual signals into one-to-one action across every channel. We'll talk about why content is referenced, never embedded, why you don't let an agent free write content at send time, and how you create content is actually the unlock for the governance model that ships and gets it past your regulator and gets it past your board. This is a very, very practical session. You will get into quite a lot of detail, technical detail, by the way. So people who like that, you will have all of that technical detail. You'll be able to take this plan away and execute it yourselves on Monday. For those that are less technical and more on the strategic side, there will be analogies as we go through the session today that will hopefully bring it to life for you and help you to understand how the technical elements that I cover actually work in reality in the technology. So what are we talking about when we talk about one-to-one CRM marketing? What does that actually mean? So basically there's 6 levers. So one-to-one decisions. Every single customer gets a decision made for them, not the segment that they fall into. Every customer gets a decision made for them based on each moment in time. So frequency, like how often this person's hear from you, set by their own engagement and their own fatigue, not by blanket rules around frequency and around cadence. Then engagement, like the next action chosen to actually move what you need to move within this specific customer, whether that's reactivate, deepen, reassure, reward, or trigger. Moments of truth. So everyone's experienced those really frustrating moments where, payment doesn't go through, or you don't know what to do when you're onboarding onto a new product or service, or those more positive moments of truth, like in the gambling sector or in sports streaming, that kind of post-win high that you get, or those first signs of a disengagement. So those moments that happen in real time when a customer's engaging and interacting with the product. Then content assembled in real time based on real-time attribute personalization. So the customer's current state at the moment of send, not the snapshot from last week's batch, like the actual moment. And then timing across every channel. So timing is, of course, different to frequency. Timing is bespoke to individuals. How they engage and what they do with your products and service will vary. And if you do all of these things automatically, you take all of these signals and then you trigger communications using all of these signals, you go from broad segment-based activity to making like thousands, and depending on your customer base, maybe hundreds of thousands, like calls every single day. And so what I often see when I'm talking to leaders about this is that they worry that this is unauditable, right? So CRM 1.0, one message, one list. Basically, your audit trail for CRM 1.0, the batch and blast campaigns, is your list, basically. It's everybody you sent it to. Your audit trail for CRM 2.0 is your journey canvas. So you can work out why they went through these steps because it's built and visual in your journey canvas. And you can find customers across every single step. In CRM 3.0, because you're building a different path for every single customer in every single moment in real time, then you'll wrongly conclude that it's unauditable. But it's not unauditable. You're just auditing it at the wrong layer. Because ultimately, if you've got a very large customer base, you're going to end up with millions and millions of journeys over the course of a year. And even if you've got like a customer base of 20,000 customers, you can still end up with hundreds of thousands of journeys over a year and potentially even millions as well. So you can't audit every single journey, but you need to audit it at a different layer. And I'll talk about that in the course of today. And the kind of the key principle to follow that unlocks agentic CRM is that the agent, and I'll talk about the technical aspects of the agent in a moment, the agent carries pointers, not payloads. So the agent reads the behavioral state of the individual customer. It picks an approved action, and then it emits like a short structured instruction, like an API call. It says this customer, this action, this channel, this message, this creative now. It never ever stores content and never writes content. It selects. So to kind of explain that in a slightly deeper layer, you take the customer signals and think about this. This is the first analogy actually I'm going to share with you. So you think about the customer signals, the table. So you've got the customers, the 6 customers around a table, a dinner table. Yeah. So take it as a restaurant. So the customer signals. So what they do, and that data exists in your cloud platform, your BigQuery, in Azure, in AWS. So what they do, what they skip, in what order, with what intensity. Then the waiter, that's the decision layer. So the agent looks at each customer and decides, based on those signals, what the best meal is for that particular customer. And then the kitchen is your execution layer. So you still need, this is not about replacing your MarTech execution platform with agents. You still need your MarTech execution platform. You still need your ESP or your customer engagement platform. And the agent picks from the menu for each individual customer and then instructs the kitchen to prepare the dish based on the menu. And then the execution layer serves that dish, your communication, to that individual customer at the right moment. And the customer then gets a path built entirely for them, but within the context of the menu that's already been provided to the agent. So the agent contains pointers. They contain customer reference. They never contain PII. That should all exist within your execution platform, but they contain references to the action, the channel, and the content references. And we'll go a lot deeper on those components through this. But I think probably the most important thing for a lot of people is like, what actually is the agent? So the agent is technology that exists on top of your cloud platform. So Vertex AI, Bedrock agents, and then orchestration frameworks like LangGraph or Pru AI. And later I'll show you the full architecture, but there's lots of different options there. And usually you will align your agent to your cloud data provider, and often it's included in your software. So in your cloud data license, you may not even be using it. But so the cloud data, so looking at the visual at the top, the cloud data determine and the understanding that exists around that, then is fed into the agent. The agent takes the approved menu, the actions that it's allowed to execute against, and then sends the signals to the execution layer to execute. So the agent operates from a menu, which is known as an action space, and that's a governed registry of approved actions, each with its unique trigger, guardrails, template, pointer, and eligibility rules. And you can build this, you can build a prototype in the vendor console, in the cloud platform. You can build something yourself, or you can build like a simple UI that marketers can build, who can use themselves, and they can do point and click. Is it a chat? Well, it's not a chat. It is a chat when you build it. Obviously, when you're doing kind of Copilot, you can kind of ask it to do specific things around the action space. You can build that into the code. But once it's built, it reads from and emits a structured decision, which is those pointers. And customers do not talk to the agent. This is not ChatGPT for customers. Yeah, this is nobody talks to it except for when you're building the action space. This exists almost invisible to customers. So what you tell the agent would be its role and its objective. So the approved menu, the tools that it gets exposed to, the guardrails, and then it outputs the action. And it never authors the content. And I'll talk about how we create content in a moment. And then the agent emits that structured decision, that pointer manifests, and via an API or a webhook or an event stream to your ESP. And then the ESP resolves that reference and sends the new communication to the individual. So just this is a kind of another way of saying what I've already said for 2 slides, but just so everyone kind of gets it. Yeah, I don't want to go too fast. So the menu is the action space. This is the approved actions, the triggers, the guardrails, the template point, and the selection rules. No copy, no creative, no PII. The kitchen, which is your ESP, that includes the template and the PII. So the channel layout, you have, like in the case of emails, it would be the template that you use for the email layout. In case of an in-app pop-up, you might have a specific design instruction that you want to use for different moments. In case of push messages, sometimes you may be using a CTA and image, sometimes you won't. So all those templates will be created. And then the assets, it's almost like the pantry. Items that then populate those templates exist elsewhere, and they're all pre-created and pre-approved. So they would exist in your digital asset management, in your CDN, in your CMS. So that would be articles, copy, product assets, offers, and they get synced by metadata and deep link back to the source, and they never get copied in, right? So you're always referencing that asset store to populate the template, and the agent makes the instruction to select the template and select the assets. So you have one source of truth for each. The agent holds the pointer to the action, the template, the asset, and the customer. The ESP holds the PII and the template, and the content and the assets are stored in the DAM, the CDN, or the CMS. And obviously there's many ways that you can configure this, many ways. So there's 2 ways you can do the kind of the content referencing. So you can pre-sync it via a catalog feed. So you can sync the CMS and DAM metadata into your ESP's catalog. So you can have every customer engagement platform supports catalogs. So you have like time, title, description, the CDN URL, for example, the deep link, the ID, and the agent instruction says use this component, and then at render, the template looks at the catalog and assembles the message you need for the individual. There's no dependency at send, which is great. Or you can do things like you can do real-time API resolution at send or at open, which just adds an extra layer of complexity to it, but it's important like in some industries where you've got like live content. And so this is what happens. So on the left-hand side, you have the customer stakes, you have the motivation, maybe this behavioral drift, you have the attributes and the profile, maybe the life cycle stage, you have the engagement or fatigue, you have the offer eligibility, you have the real-time events. Then the agent looks for all of that data and then references out the template, the copy blocks, the hero images, the offers, the subject lines, the channel, the send time. So the old way is you have like one content block per segment, and like there's a static send time, or maybe staggered send times with different cohorts, but generally it's pretty static. For agentic CRM, the agent reasons over the entire individual and assembles the improved components per person and can create entirely bespoke one-to-one journeys for every individual customer. And so like one of the questions sometimes I get from people, particularly those that don't work in recurring revenue sectors, I work a lot with recurring revenue sectors, those data where there's a lot of data. Like for the last decade, I've focused on brands like streaming and gambling and publishing and subscription apps and sports clubs, but they have like masses and masses of data. So sometimes people ask me, why do you want to do that? Right, well, there's kind of three categories of reason. So firstly, to protect the customer. So at moments of truth, and I talked about this before, like moments of friction, so a failed payment, an onboarding stall, a billing ticket, or some product friction, you want to help customers to get over that moment of friction as quickly as possible. And so that moment, triggered in that pop-up, explaining to the customer what to do in the moment is perfect. That does not work as a send. You can also use it for like regulatory duty of care, and this is particularly important in gaming. So it lets you improve eligibility, suppress over-contacted customers, manage vulnerable customers, also improve reporting in the finance or services sector as well. Then there's a kind of second category. Some people that are on this call that have been to some of my other webinars when I talk a lot about behavioral drift. So recurring revenue sectors, you can pick up movement away from value before churn signals occur, and then you can correct the course and bring customers back to value and therefore prevent churn before it already even becomes conscious with the customer. And so by reading behavioral states, you can identify when a customer has gone from 4 app opens to 2 in a week, whereas that customer may seem very active by all other thresholds, but they're moving away from their own normal, they're moving away from their own time to meaningful action, or they'll go from 45 minutes to 20 minutes watch. They're becoming less engaged, and therefore you can nudge them back to value. Also, you can also use the data in the reverse, where a customer's relationship with you is deepening. You can spot who is realizing value, and then in real time tier up, cross-sell, and lift ARPU. And then finally, probably the classical way in which people think about this as well is like real-time next best action or real-time personalization and sharper recommendations. If you know what a customer's doing in the moment of your source data, then obviously you can deliver much better, relevant, contextual recommendations at the moment. So you can protect and decide with precision how to treat each individual customer based on their individual signals, right? One of the questions, actually, somebody commented on, I hope the person's here, I don't know if I think it's a guy called Mazen, commented on one of my posts today. This is great, but how do we create all this content? Because, truly one-to-one personalization requires a lot of content, right? And the way I do that is with my AI second brain. So I'll explain, there's 2 slides on this, I'll explain to you how to actually build this yourselves. But what I've done is I've took all of my IP, all of my knowledge, all of my 100+ case studies, my retention course, and ingested that into a platform called Obsidian, which is a knowledge base, and that includes nodes for every concept. And so when you connect your second brain to your chosen AI, it can then reference that second brain when it's creating content. So, for example, in my second brain, I have proven CRM and retention principles. Things like people don't read emails. They scan them. They scan the subject line, the headline, and then they work out whether it's relevant. And then proven behavioral science principles as well. I have about 40 different behavioral science principles, things like scarcity and urgency, and less classical ones as well. You will always also ingest, because it's an offline platform, this is not stored on the internet, your client's business and IP, and you create a locked instance of Claude when you're using your clients or another AI, whatever you prefer, and when you're using client IP. And then you can also ingest like context surrounding the client project. So I'm working on a World Cup project recently, and then we've got all of the player and team history ingested as well. So what you can do then is you can instruct the AI to create thousands and thousands of personalized messages under many, many, many different scenarios. So for the World Cup, we created 3,200 different assets. And I've got to say, you have to read them. right? You can't just ingest them and hope. You do have to read it, and this is what gets it past the board. But this is what scales content production. This is what allows you to produce masses and masses of content at scale. And it's grounded content generation that the agent selects. Once you've read it and you've approved it and your team have approved it, it's passed all the guardrails that you need it to pass, then the agent never free writes. It selects from that approved content library and then serves. Because if you let an agent free write at send time, you're just effectively you're asking for risk, because you have no control at that point. And we all know that agents and AI hallucinates and gets things wrong, right? So you have to put these controls in place, otherwise you can end up with a real mess. And so let me just explain how I built my second brain, and you can do the same. Download Obsidian, it's totally free. Build a broad folder structure, populate each node, one idea per node is best. Connect it to your AI. I use Claude Code, but you can use whatever you want. Claude Code, called Claude Cowork, by the way. Cowork is called code, but people are allowed to code. Use the app, don't try and do it in the browser. And then once configured, all the work you do in your chosen AI can be referenced in your second brain. And then when you create projects, say you create projects for a specific client, it's referencing your second brain, then it also has all the context of the client project as well. And this is how you can create really brilliant work really, really, really fast. And so just to kind of, for kind of the third or the fourth time, just go through the kind of the analogy of how it works. So you have a menu with an improved set of actions, a fixed set of dishes that the kitchen can serve. So those dishes are all your content components that you've created potentially with your second brain. The agent is the decision layer that reads the customer and then picks the dish for each customer. And the execution platform is your customer engagement platform, or your ESP, which plates the recipe to a standard. And then the pantry, where it gets all the ingredients for that dish, is your content store. And so the waiter never cooks, never invents a dish off menu, and that's why the board signs it off. That's why it's approved. And I said at the start, this is not like pie in the sky, right? There's lots of brands that are doing this already, but two of the kind of the most well-known brands are Netflix and Uber. And they published how they engineer their messaging. And it is CRM 3.0. There is a decision that's decoupled from the send, and they use pointers, not payloads. And so, like taking Netflix on the left-hand side, they have an offline agent which builds a weekly pacing plan per user, and it has a model that says, that weighs whether engaging the customer will be better, like messaging them will be better than not messaging them, and whether it's caused fatigue or opt out, or whether it causes even platform churn because it reminds customers that they have the product that they're not using. Where it builds a model that decides whether this customer should be messaged. And then they have an executor, which is a real-time engine. Each send opportunity, it checks the planner's intent. If it's allowed to send a message to this customer, picks the optimal message. They have pre-built templates, and they pull in the tasks. And you'll have seen Netflix communications. If you get those, some people don't, some people do because of the planner. If you get those, you'll see that it's all built to a standard template, and they're all based on assets that are pulled from essentially from the product. And then Uber is similar as well. They use contextual bandits and a real-time feature store. So every communication has slots. Contextual bandit models predict open probability and then assembles the best variant for every individual user. If you move location, there's a real-time override, and it changes what it's going to include within the message for you. Completely and utterly governed AI generation, one-to-one messaging at scale. I mean, Netflix have over 400 million customers, right? This is hugely relevant one-to-one messaging, which is why Netflix is so successful. It's all ultimately about personalization. Now, I'll kind of be obvious point to make for some people, but I just think it's worth reiterating. In order to do agentic CRM really well, then you have to have your data in a good state. The project doesn't fail because the AI is no good. The projects fail because you don't have the data in a good enough state. And the old iceberg visual is very important here. And I really can't stress enough the importance of good quality data. But what I would also say, though, if you want to do a pilot, you do not need to have every element of data perfect, right? If you pick one moment of truth, the one stage in the life cycle, sometimes you only need 10 or 15 real-time events to make it work. And sometimes you can do that off one platform, so one source. So if you're a streamer, if you're using Conviva, if you're in a publishing sector, you can use your CMS. Sometimes you can get that real-time data relatively easily. But what I would say as well, there's a lot of people that think that many companies aren't in a good state with their data. But what I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, and particularly the class that I work with, increasingly many organizations do have their data in a good state. Cloud platforms are enabling it. And that's why so many organizations are able to do agentic CRM. So there's 4 questions you must be able to answer. And if you can't answer these, then this blocks the project. So how do I track who got what? That's like a number 1 fear of the board. If there's no journey to look at, you need to be able to track that. Number 2, like what stops it hammering, the agent hammering one segment? Like what stops the agent kind of sending messages every hour to somebody who's very engaged, or going completely silent on somebody that's given up on? And if an agent is hammering somebody every hour, in some industries like gaming, that can be like a real regulatory flag. Then the third one is like, who approved this copy? So like, as I said before, if the model free writes at send time, you have a block box, you don't know what gets sent, it's not going to work. Like, you're asking for problems if you think that you're going to let an agent free write at send time. Like, it's just, you have to be able to review all the content in advance. And that's probably the most time consuming part of this when you're putting this live. And that's why I believe that AI is not going to get rid of people, by the way, guys. AI is going to enable people. We're always going to need people to do the action spaces, the guardrails, to review the content and make sure everything is structured and set up properly. And then the fourth one is, you need to know, like, you need to be able to show why a customer got what they got in any moment of time. But the agent's deciding, it's based on the state, it's based on the action space that you've defined, the rules that you've given it. So you need to be able to know why the customer got something like last March. Like when it comes back through, you know, as it quite often can in CRM 2.0 and 1, like where somebody complains, so they got a message, why did they get it? You need to be able to show why they got that message. And it needs to be versioned, even if you kind of change the policy. And like all of these things like have a really clean, defensible, boring answer, which I'm going to go through. Maybe not boring for people on this call, but sometimes boring. And it's often why people are a bit scared. They go, agentic CRM sounds good, but there's too many unknowns. It's too kind of, I don't have control. Actually, you do have control. You have completely control. And if you adopt that attitude that you don't have control and therefore it's not something you want to do, then, you know, per Gartner, everyone else is going to be ahead of you by 2028. So, and churn will continue to rise, and you still have, you know, value growth opportunities that you're missing. So you have to be able to answer these questions. And so in that context, actually governance is the thing that lets you put your foot down on this. This is the thing that makes this really, really work. And this is my second analogy, is the trading desk. So anybody there might be some people on here that work in trading actually. When you're a trader, if you're a trader, you have an envelope. So those are like the position limits, and the trader can't go beyond those positions. So it's the same with agentic CRM. The agent operates to very clear boundaries. So it's very clear. So if you message Sarah 6 times in a day, then there's a boundary that says Sarah could be messaged 6 times in a day. If you set a boundary that says Sarah can only be messaged 3 times in a day, the agent observes that boundary. So that's the first thing. So frequency caps, offer limits. If you don't set a boundary to the offer and the agent is optimizing for conversion, if you give like a 99% discount, well, of course you don't want that, right? So there has to be boundaries around the offer, and that might vary by customer as well. And the second point is the ledger, so like the blotter. So this is the immutable record of every single trade. So every agent decision is reconstructible. Every action space auditable, the customer timestamp, the channel, the signal that triggered the behavior, the eligibility, the suppression, text passed, every policy, every action set, every model, every template used, everything's tracked, you know, everything that happened. And then in trading as well, compliance is obviously a really important part of that. For insider trading and like lots of different reasons. Anything in financial services, anything involving money is like heavily regulated. And surveillance is really, in the context of agentic CRM, is about watching the entire book. So obviously audience population variation is the point. Like we're trying to create one-to-one messages in the moment for the right customer with the right content, message, offer, signal, etc. But you will want to be looking at the whole book to review the extremes, and the extremes can capture failure modes, like the hammering of a segment or going quiet on another. And then every agent is given an objective or goal, and you have to review what it's told to maximize. And sometimes you'll find if an agent is told to maximize short-term revenue, that can have long-term or medium-term implications, right, for the relationship. So there's a reward function, the fatigue penalty, and that needs to be governed, and controlled, and usually that's where you track bad behavior to. But if you put in place this governance before you go live, then you've got an answer to all of those questions that the board or the executive is going to ask you. And that is another question I also get asked quite a lot. Isn't Klaviyo or Braze or Optimove or, you know, Bloomreach, any of those guys, aren't they already doing this already? And every MarTech vendor is absolutely talking about agentic CRM. And I would say like 99% of cases, it's useful stuff, right? They're doing good stuff, right? Really, honestly, I'm a really big fan of how the MarTech world is evolving. But really, in reality, most MarTech CRM tools are a CDP bolted onto an ESP. That's basically what they are. So you've got a view of the data that exists on the cloud platform. Quite often it's applied around 24-hour batch. Sometimes you get some real-time signals, and then you've got a send platform on top of it. So if you are like a Klaviyo shop, right? If you've got a Shopify business on one website, you've got some inventory, and you've got Klaviyo, you got like a really simple business, then you might not need agentic CRM. But most of the businesses that I work with have data spread across multiple different silos. And the single source of truth of that data is their cloud data platform. And that's where that data is available in real time, continuously. And so if you have unstructured data spread across platforms, or with regulatory constraints, then you need to think about your architecture sitting on top of your cloud platform, still leveraging these tools at the execution layer, and it's still providing valuable agentic capability at the execution layer, but putting the decisioning into the agent. Now, the next question I get asked when I talk about this is, why can't we use a decisioning tool? And the answer is you can. You can use a decisioning tool instead of using an agent. And there is some great decisioning tools out there as well. But there's 4 tests that I usually suggest that you need to think about before you decide on using a decisioning tool instead of using a cloud platform agent. Test 1. It reads, like some decisioning tools require you to load all your data into them. That's just a delay there. So that doesn't work. You can't be re-ingesting data in real time from one source to the other. You're just moving data around for no reason. 2, it needs to be able to select an approved action and emit a pointer. It doesn't read free write send time. I've said that a few times already. You need to not have a black box. Like you need to know how the decision tool is working. Like what is it doing and why is it making those decisions? Otherwise, you're going to run into governance failure, right, with agentic CRM, because you're going to go, the board will go, why did it message Sarah 6 times and why did it give her a 99% discount every time? If you don't know the answer to that, because it's based on the black box and this failure mode, it's not going to work. Obviously, it needs to serve every channel. You can't be welded to one SP. You can't be in a situation where you want to move ASP, you lose your brain, right? So that's why if you decouple it from your end MarTech execution platform, the brain, and you put it into your cloud platform, you can control it all. It's completely portable. So if you but sometimes decisioning tools, and there's some, I'm not going to promote vendors here because I'm not affiliated to vendors. I'm not going to promote a vendor here, but some do pass all those 4 tests, right? So let's just put that out there. Quite often they don't. And if it does fail one of these tests, it's annexing your data, annexing your content, annexing your governance, it's locking you in. This makes you incredibly difficult to get out of, or it's causing you a problem for future governance questions. So the solution, as you probably guessed, is to build on the cloud infrastructure. So I promised the full end-to-end architecture. This is it. So you've got your data at the left-hand side, so your event data, product analytics, usage, billing, service, identity resolution, BigQuery, Databricks, Snowflake, AWS, Azure. That's where all that data exists. You have your agents sitting on top of that. So depending on what your cloud platform is, you quite often have an agentic capability embedded into your cloud platform license, and some companies aren't even using it, and then they've got it, but they're not even using it, because all these brands want you to use their tech. So it doesn't really matter what you've got your source data in. Everybody will have one of these. Their source data in one of those. And then understanding the truth layer and agent orchestration all sit around in that kind of same waiter kind of part of the analogy. So they are understanding the customer state. They are calling the truth layer, so your policy frameworks, your pricing frameworks, your offer frameworks, and that's called RAG, like retrieval augmented generation. And then agent orchestration is then those pointers that it sends out to your execution platforms to instruct on what content to create and then what message to send. Any execution platform there works for this. And then you have governance and oversight every single step. So you have the envelope, the ledger, the distribution, all tracked every single step. And there's additional tools you can use for that, things like telemetry. And then you also have a human in the loop layer for certain edge cases, high value customers. You always have control groups. This doesn't bring the end of control groups. Everybody who's a seasoned CRM marketer should be using control groups in everything that you do. And this does not bring about the end to that. Control groups are still fundamental. And you have a circuit breaker. If things just start going wrong, there's a button you can press to stop, right? That'll be because you haven't defined the action space well enough, by the way. And usually what you need to do is when you're rolling out these agents is you do a period where you just let the agent recommend to you. tell you what to do for each individual customer, and then you look at the context and the signals for that individual customer and look at what the agent would have done. And when you do that for like days to make sure that it's doing the right things, and what you'll find then is you think you've defined your access space really clearly, but you actually haven't. Yeah, you haven't defined it clearly enough, and then you fix it. And then you run it at a small percentage of the base, and then you make the decisions that make the sense. And then if you spot problems, then you roll back again. And only when you've got really robust and really, really comfortable that you can let the agent continue. And you will always need to create content. You need to re-ingest content as your product and business changes. You'll change rules. You'll understand the dynamics of the way in which it's serving offers and how that's affecting your commercials. And you'll always continuously update these action spaces, update the content engine to make this work. Yeah. So this is again why I am a firm believer. I'm a massive evangelist of AI, and I'm really enthusiastic about the change it brings. I don't guess that, but this is why I'm a firm believer that this is not going to result in loads of people no longer being required in CRM. Everyone's going to be required in CRM, but you move away from being operators to being orchestrators. And so how to actually start? Firstly, get the data right. But again, it doesn't need to be, every single data point doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need at least like 15, 20 events for one specific moment to make this work. But you need your data right. Today's not right, this won't work. You define your action space in the envelope first, like the limits that you can do and the menu of things that you can do. So it's effectively your strategy, basically, right? It's your strategy. And then you wire the decisioning to the execution platform. So cloud platforms, plus the cloud platforms native agent capability, wire that to your execution platforms. Make sure you stand up the audit before you scale. So build your distribution dashboards before you put any volume into it. Make sure you've got the ledger in place, tracking all of the different decisions and content and versions that exist, and then switch on the controls. Make sure you've got the circuit breaker there. You've got the human in the loop for those edge cases where really a human really is needed, and you've got the control group in place. Things that kill these projects and make them not work is just letting the agent free write at the same time. Just failure. Buying agentish from vendors and assuming that the brain's handled, or even that the brain is you're not even sure what is in the brain or what is making the decisions. No envelope, so there's no like limits, so they just does whatever it wants. Rewarding engagement instead of retention, or rewarding some other instead of retention or some other commercial goal. You don't want to optimize for clicks, you want to optimize for commercial outcomes. Not having a control group, so you can't measure the impact of it. And then thinking that you can audit the journey, because you can't. You have to audit the rules that exist around the journey, so the envelope, the ledger, and the distribution. So we're nearly at the end, and there's a bit of time for Q&A, so I'll cover that, and I'll go as long as people want to talk. But firstly, capture the signal. So individual level data, behavioral signals, engagement, lifecycle state, real-time attributes on every customer. The agent decides the one-to-one action, but it's not the agent deciding, it's not autonomous acting without your instruction. It's operating to the governance and to the action space that you've defined that you can operate within around frequent, moment, channel, timing, and you prove it safe through the envelope, the ledger, the distribution, and you have an audit trail for everything. So that your regulator, your exec, will sign it off. So this is what I'm doing. This is what I work with brands on. If you want to move from individual level signals to one-to-one action, and you want to build agentic CRM for your business or for your client's business, you can talk to me. As I said, over the last 6 months, I've run 3 projects where I've transitioned away from consulting into agentic execution. My consulting business is called Retention Coach. My new business is called Retention AI. The new website is not launched yet, but this is what I'm doing. So if you want to talk to me, you want to find out more about what I'm doing, you can check out my website. But honestly, I prefer, if you want to chat about this stuff, I prefer you just DM me on LinkedIn. Or if you don't like LinkedIn, just send me an email and then we can chat. And just to kind of clarify how I work with clients and businesses around agentic CRM. So model A is you've got capable engineers and you can fit it into your roadmap. I work with your internal teams, and it's more of a consultancy job, and we work together. If you're working with like a CACI or Merkle or somebody like that, I've worked in partnership with Merkle before, and there's potential with doing talking around stuff with a CACI as well. If you've got one of those as a partner, then I'll work with your tech partner, and again, it's a consultancy thing. Also, I have developers in Pakistan, India, and Poland, and I build these for you, and have done that as well. So that's it. We've got time for questions. As I said, I will stay as long as there is questions. Thank you. Thank you for the emojis. Very cool. Appreciate all of that, guys.